Alrighty, so it's just after 5:30, so I'll go ahead and get us started. I want to welcome everybody to the Global Service Showcase and our panel tonight on education and youth and development. This is an event that's hosted by Indiana University's Global Service and Peace Corps Preparation Program. So my name is Dr. Nichols, and I coordinate the Global Service and Peace Corps Preparation Program, and I'll also be moderating the panel tonight. So this is a program that's part of the Center for the Study of Global Change and also works in collaboration with the International Studies Department to offer an undergraduate certificate. So this event has been co-organized by our undergraduate outreach and communication assistant, Logan Gunning, and is designed to engage students and others interested in hearing the experiences of professionals who work in a variety of nonprofit organizations around the world, within the United States, and within our own community. The goal of this showcase is to raise awareness of the diversity of globally beneficial service work that can be done at international, regional, and local levels. So before I introduce our panelists, I would like to thank our co-sponsors, the African Studies Program, the Center for the Study of the Middle East, and the Russian and East European Institute, as well as the Global Center and the Hamilton Lugar School staff for supporting this event. So we've got refreshments in the back. This isn't going to be a super formal event, so we encourage you to ask questions. There's going to be plenty of time for conversation, but also please keep eating the food. It is there to be eaten. All right, so introducing our panelists here today. We have Kenneth Biznessman Allen, who is the director of the Indiana Trafficking Victims Assistance Program. He's also chairman of the Indiana Commission on the Social Status of Black Males. He's a native of Gary, Indiana, who studied business and political science at IUPUI, so IU alum. He's also an alumnus of the Congressional Black Caucus Leadership Institute, a graduate of the Indianapolis Public Safety Citizens Academy, a Journey New Pro Fellow, a certified child and youth care practitioner, and an FBI Citizens Academy graduate. In addition to his work with ITVAP, the Trafficking Victims Assistance Program, he's also an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a community activist. He has a passion for helping marginalized youth and economically disenfranchised communities, and he counts among one of his proudest achievements, December 4th, which was proclaimed by Indianapolis Mayor as Kenneth Allen Day for his outstanding leadership and success as an entrepreneur. His life mission is to inspire and serve, and he's a father of two beautiful children, Jaden and Kennedy. Also joining us tonight, we have Dana Vanderberg, who works with Movement Exchange and is also a graduate student in our Department of Anthropology here on campus. She graduated with a BA in French and a BA MA in International Studies from IU Bloomington, and is now continuing her studies as a PhD of Social Cultural Anthropology with a minor in African Studies. She is also currently the executive director of Movement Exchange, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to unite dance and service through its network of university chapters, international dance exchanges, and year-round programs in underserved communities in the US, Panama, and Brazil. So her professional work and academic research focuses on advocating for the inclusion of arts, particularly dance, and youth empowerment initiatives due to their role in building positive relationships. Her passion for the arts and community engagement has led her to do research and do arts outreach and advocacy in communities around the US, the Republic of Panama, Ghana, and Canada. And unfortunately, our third and final panelist, Ellie Cohen, who's a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for the Study of Global Change, recently fell ill. So luckily she is on campus, so if anybody was interested in learning about her work with the Peace Corps in Morocco or some of her consulting work with UNICEF, we can easily connect you with Ellie, and I also have a few brief notes from her. But yes, when you are contagious, you're supposed to stay away from campus. So I will now transition over to moderating. All right, so I know I already very formally introduced you, but if you would tell us a little bit about what does your job entail? What work do you do with your organization, and what is your favorite part of your work?
First of all, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the invitation for allowing us to be here. Again, my name is Kenneth Allen. I currently serve as the director of the Indiana Trafficking Victim Assistance Program, which is one of the signature programs of Indiana Youth Service Association. And if you're not familiar with Indiana Youth Service Association, it was started in 1973. At that time, Indiana was incarcerating more juveniles than any other state in the nation. And these various youth directors got together and said, this is embarrassing, we have to do something. And thusly, our organization was formed to do 4 primary roles: community education, juvenile delinquency prevention, advocacy work, and the fourth one slips from my mind at this time, but our work has typically been youth focused for the last 40 years. Our organization as a whole, we don't provide any direct services, but we do have a few signature programs. The one that I manage is the Indiana Trafficking Victim Assistance Program. It is a statewide program that's in the tune of $3.8 million that is set up to address human trafficking. And so we have staff that cover all 92 counties that educate and bring awareness around human trafficking and what it looks like in the local community. In addition to the awareness and the education and training piece, we also work very diligently to identify service providers in those local communities that can help service young people ages 13 to 24 who have been affected by human trafficking. In addition to the IPVAP program, OISA does the Making Good Decisions campaign. If you're not familiar with Making Good Decision, it does a lot of education on high school campuses as well as college campuses around the Lifeline Law. And the Lifeline Law basically allows immunity if someone is drinking underage and they get the proper authority. So we do a lot of digital marketing to educate young people about that law. In addition to the Making Good Decisions, two of our newest programs is the CYC program, which is the Child and Youth Credentialing. A lot of people look at the field of youth work and say, you know, do you really need a degree or education to work with kids? And so we're trying to change that mindset and really certify youth workers across the state. Currently in Indiana, we've been fortunate in the last 2 years to certify about 400 youth workers across the state of Indiana at 3 different levels. There's an associate level, a advanced level, and then the professional level. And so we have about 400 certified youth care workers across the state. And then our most recent program that we've added to our organization is called The Journey. The Journey is a renewal program that also has 3 different levels. One is a student level, and all of the students that are selected for the Journey Fellowship at the student level will receive a paid internship as a part of that fellowship. And then there's 2 different levels. There is a new professional, and those are for folks that have only been working in the field of youth work for less than 10 years. And then we have the executive level, which is for folks that are at the managerial director role. And so that's a program that's totally free. It provides at least 4 opportunities throughout the course of a year for these various professionals, the youth, new professional, executive level, to come together, get renewed, get refreshed, get some time away from work so they can actually be the best self that they can be. And so those are our signature programs. I've been with the organization for the last 5 years. And what I enjoy most about our organization is that I worked for many years directly with young people. So I would see young people every day through various programs that I worked in my past. And I kind of got burnt out being every day involved. And so I was challenged when I moved to this role because it's more of a grass top level. I don't get to see kids. Again, we don't work directly with young people. But I know that the work is appreciated because we're putting systems in place that will benefit kids, generations to come. So that's the joy that I could have seen that plan come to pass.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dana again. It's really weird for me to be up here in this role because I actually just a few years ago was, in your shoes as an undergraduate student in international studies, part of a lot of these programs, sitting in these seats to learn from professionals, and now here I am. So it's kind of a weird experience. So I am currently within IU. I'm a PhD student in social cultural anthropology, so also still a student at IU. I haven't left yet. But I'm also the executive director for a nonprofit organization called Movement Exchange. And that's what I'm kind of here to talk about today. Although really those 2 kind of components of my identity and my work are very complementary. And so we can talk a little bit about that later, if you like, about kind of how you can merge a lot of what your kind of research and academic passions are with what you are doing currently within your communities and the work that you're passionate about. But Movement Exchange as an organization is 10 years old now. It is kind of, its mission is, which was kind of in my bio, but I'll elaborate a little more, is to kind of take this idea of dance, and particularly, within this country, the idea of, who is a dancer, who has access to dance education is a very kind of in the box, right? You go to a dance studio to dance, which requires resources, which requires access to this sort of education, which is a form of really creative expression that we all are capable of. And so the mission of Movement Exchange is to really kind of bring forth the idea that dance can be united with service, and that dancers in particular, like other artists who already are engaging in their communities in various forms, provide them a platform for which to do that. And so what that looks like is we kind of have three arms of our organization. So we have university chapters. So there's one here at IU. Actually, the first university chapter of Movement Exchange was founded here because I heard about the work that our founder was doing. So just Movement Exchange is very fond of IU for many reasons. And so what that means is that your classmates here on campus, there are many from across different units of campus, different dance programs, non-dance majors, they're going out into the greater Bloomington community and are providing free dance classes for different community partners. So right now they're working with the Boys and Girls Club, Middle Way House, the domestic violence shelter here in town. We've worked with, oh goodness, so many different organizations, Girls Inc. We've done kind of one-off workshops with other events that are looking to have someone come in and lead a dance class or something like that. And so we have about 20 university chapters around the US, so it is a national organization in that scope. So all of those different university chapters are doing that work in their own community with organizations where they're at. We also have year-round sustainable dance programs in Panama, which is where the founder had been living for a long time, so that's kind of where she started her work there. And so we have about 3 right now, year-round programs where we are hiring Panamanian dance instructors to teach dance with our different youth organization partners. And they're still the partners that actually we've been working with for about 10 years now, which is pretty amazing. And so it's providing access to dance and creative expression to youth organizations and orphanages where these kids would not otherwise have access to this form of outlet. And then our third component is kind of organizing international dance exchanges where members of our university chapters, also other dancers from around the country, also from around the world, we've had some people join us from other countries besides the US. They participate in our exchanges where they are teaching dance classes to the youth in our programs, but then they're also taking dance classes from our instructors. And so they're learning different styles of dance, and we're kind of engaging in an exchange that way. And they also partner with the University of Panama there. So that's kind of Movement Exchange. It's a very kind of broad organization in many ways, but it's very focused on the idea of dance and movement and being able to share and build relationships through that kind of form of expression and communication. And I think my favorite part of my job is really being able to talk with people about what movement means to them and to see the ways in which, you know, when you have a dance class, whether that's here, whether that's in Panama. We also are starting to kind of provide programs in Brazil. That's very new. So we don't yet have our year-round component there, but we do have exchanges to Brazil. So I forgot to mention that. But for me, what's really beautiful is that wherever you are, is just being able to watch those relationships form through dance and through movement and be able to have conversations about that then afterwards, right? Like, you know, why is it that we all feel so good when we're dancing together? And what does that allow us to express and release and share that we can't otherwise do and are often conditioned not to do? So that's really my favorite part, is getting to watch those moments and have those conversations with people about what that means to them.
And I'll share just really briefly some of the work that Ellie Cohen does here at the Global Center, but also in the broader Indiana community. So as a postdoctoral fellow, she kind of has a range of responsibilities, and some of the work that she's particularly been focusing on this year is using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to especially encourage K through 12 teachers and students to think about, you know, okay, if I live here in Indiana, I'm planning to live in Bedford my entire life, why do I need to know about an issue happening in China? Or why do I need to think about clean water issues? And so kind of encouraging teachers by helping develop resources and giving different examples to encourage both teachers and then those students to engage in different ways. So Ellie has a background, her PhD is in the field of education, and so she's also teaching classes here on campus, especially looking at refugee education and doing some work in group seeking refuge. I don't know if some of you have heard of that organization. She's doing some work with them. And she also works with the Dubai Center for Innovation and Sustainable Development to kind of think about, okay, if we're trying to train the next generation of international development practitioners, what does that look like in campuses around the country, but also how do we want to do that here at Indiana University? And so, there's a lot of kind of common threads between her work, but also some of the background for this event. How do we encourage people here in our community to think about, if I want to do international development work, what are meaningful experiences I can have, doing summer internships or volunteer experiences. You might not have the finances to go spend every summer in Morocco, but there's still transferable skills you can build use by going on to serve in the Peace Corps in Morocco like Ellie did before she went on to do her PhD. So our next question is, how does your job or some of your career experience address or intersect with these global issues?
All right, so guess it's gonna be me again. I think, so what Movement Exchange really seeks to address in many ways, it seems like, okay, just dance, right? And a lot of times you get that, oh, well, you're just engaging with dance, just dance. Which for me is kind of, you often hear people kind of respond to that in a way that seems to diminish that sort of engagement as a form of addressing larger issues, right? Because it's not necessarily directly countering kind of in addressing some of these larger kind of big social problems, right, that we've addressed. So whether it's income inequality or gender inequality, these sorts of things that there's often very specific types of targeted work for. But what we really value is the chance for people to feel comfortable expressing themselves, but then also building relationships with each other in the process, to start engaging in those sort of conversations. So in a lot of the kind of groups and populations that we're working with, they're populations of, particularly youth, not exclusively youth. We also, certain chapters work with nursing homes and things like that. But they're often with groups of people that haven't had a chance to feel that their voice has been valued, that they, don't have the opportunities to express what they feel, what their challenges are, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. And so engaging in this type of communication where you're, one, providing them the opportunity to get to explore what they can do with their own body, right? Like, what sort of power do we have within ourselves to bring forward? And, that might start really silly with starting in a circle and, doing a movement when you say your name. But over time, that makes a difference, because then people enter into a space saying, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. This is what I bring to the table. And then also, that starts building relationships amongst the people within a dance space. I mean, if you've ever taken a dance class or been in a dance space, right, maybe that's just out with friends at a party or something like that, there's where you start feeling that energy, right, where you start feeling like, okay, we're all here, we're all moving together, and that sort of creates a very special moment. And so for us, we're really trying to cultivate those sort of relationships and really developing and kind of building upon the idea of kinesthetic empathy, right? What does it mean to learn to connect with someone by realizing we all share the ability to move in some way, shape, or form? It is conditioned, right? We can, certain people can't move in certain ways for a variety of different reasons, but we all move in some way, shape, or form. And so how do we kind of capitalize on that to then start building relationships and then start having discussions about that? And so for us, it's really amazing to see that some of our kids in some of our programs who have been dancing with us for 10 years now, they started as, a really young, 8-year-old kid. And a lot of the trajectory of kids in these programs is they end up getting pregnant at 16. They drop out, they join a gang. And we've seen some of our kids saying that, look, like, I want to keep dancing, and it's not about becoming a professional dancer either, but saying that I want to help do this in my community. I want to be a teacher now. I want to, and that really does have an impact on some of these broader kind of global and social issues, because you're giving people the chance to articulate what they want and their hopes and dreams, and also to be able to learn how to do that with other people. And for me, that's the value of what Movement Exchange does and how we seek to address kind of some of these larger systemic issues.
Excuse me. I echo the sentiments of Dana and the fact that our organization is very intentional about relationships. So our journey program that I mentioned, that is a fellowship program, they do two things that's really intentional about building relationships that's globally. So one of the things they do every other year is they do what is called a symposium on the sea, which is open to any person that has ever participated in the fellowship. And the journey fellowship has been going on for 10 years. And so that's an opportunity to take youth workers from Indiana outside of their everyday normal environment, put them on the sea, give them opportunity to do some professional development, typically somewhere in the middle of the ocean, which is, very rare for youth workers if you take a look at their pay start out making. And the other thing that they do every 3 years is what they call is a international youth workers retreat, where we take about 100 youth workers from Indiana across the country to some country and develop relationships and look at youth programming in those countries and see what we can do differently here, learn from some of their mistakes, and try to bring some of those ideas and concepts back to Indiana. That's what we do on the journey side. And particularly with my program, the Indiana Trafficking Victims Program, most people, when they hear about human traffic, they automatically think about it being a global issue. They don't think that it's a local issue. And so we've had to reverse that thinking here in Indiana to let folks know that, yes, it is a global issue. Next to drugs, human trafficking is the #2 criminal enterprise in the world. It's a $150 billion industry currently. And so letting folks know that, yes, it does happen in third world countries, but it also happens in Indiana, and it happens in all 92 counties, from Gary to Evansville, from Terre Haute to Richmond, Indianapolis, and Bloomington. And so just making folks understand that some of the things we see globally are affecting us here locally as well.
Yeah, no, I love how both of you touched on how important it is in the work that you do to build capacity and to create spaces for community conversations, that it's not just about going in and doing something for them, that it's also a very reciprocal effort and to make sure that their voices are being incorporated and included, and that's a key part of both of your processes. So our next question is, how do you language or, because language doesn't always come up in great detail, international or multicultural skills in your career?
So I like the fact that I work for an organization that's very intentional about being not just culturally competent, but culturally comprehensive. So we are very intentional about getting the appropriate training for our staff, for our consultants, to make sure that we're staying on par, because as you know, this is an ever-changing industry. We're very diverse, from ethnic to race to religion to sexual orientation. And so I like to say that our company is a very welcoming company, and we do that very intentionally by always trying to make sure that we're staying up to date with training. My staff, I have 2 staff members currently that work for me that are married to each other that are of the same sex. And so that's a very rare that you go into an employee and an employer that has that capacity. And so we learn a lot of things because we have open conversations and communicate well. But I think that you have to be open, and you have to stay on top of the training and be receptive to what your employees are telling you and feeding back to you.
So for movement exchange, we've always been from the very beginning incredibly, like, we have to be engaged in these conversations just by the nature that, more than half of our team are Panamanian. They are in Panama, they live there. We have our Panama country director, and then there's my coworker Izzy over there, right? Like, we're the only 2 in the US. And so there's obviously a lot of, having to negotiate what that looks like and kind of who is able to do what. So, like, we're not organizing the, year-round programming that's happening in Panama. We're not in charge of, managing that day to day because we're not there, right? So there's a lot of recognition of, like, what are you in control of? What do you have the competencies to, supervise, to oversee, to be engaged with? So Violetta, she's our, coworker who, everything that's going on with our programs in Panama, yes, I'm the executive director, but she's the person that I'm looking to explain, what we should be doing, how things work, who we need to talk to. So one, you have to make space for that just within any sort of organizational structure, is recognize, what values people bring to your team and what that looks like. It also, like silly things too, in the sense of like, we work in multiple time zones. Like when we were, this summer doing a lot of training, we also were traveling. We were at one point in like 5 different time zones. And so I was the farthest one out, so it was usually me. It was like 1 a.m. in the morning, and I was like, all right, like, fine, I'll take one for the team. Like, that'll be me. I'll be in my PJs, but okay. So there's like that sort of element as well, and just other things. Like most of our immediate communication happens over WhatsApp because that's what we are most able to connect with, like on the spot. So it's one of those types of like things that you have to navigate and decide, where are your commonalities? Like where do you have, come together as a team where you don't really have to think about that as kind of pressingly, like where you're just brainstorming about something that, that's not necessarily part of the conversation. But then there's other moments where it's like, okay, hey, this is what, this is my opinion, me being in whatever position that I'm at, and then having a conversation about that. I also, as part of my job, I'm helping prepare students who are participating in their international dance exchanges for the first time. A lot of people, it's their first time out of the country. And so a lot of part of that is kind of taking down some stereotypes about what it's going to be like to travel to a different country, and a country where they speak Spanish. And most students who are coming into our programs really open-minded. Sometimes I have to have really hard conversations with their parents who are like, oh, well, I don't want my child to go because of ISIS. And you're like, that's not, like, that's Panama. That's, geographically, like, that's just not. So, there's that element too, where you do have to kind of counter some of that and try to be mindful and intentional about how you engage in conversations with people who have different access to, and have different experiences with different kind of multicultural, international experiences and that sort of thing. And so, that's also a challenge. Like when I hear those conversations, I'm always just like, oh my gosh, like I don't, but it's an important conversation to have. And so that's like a really key part of our job and our work, is how do we also position ourselves? Like we're not just a voluntourism, come and, do this. And we see that all the time, right? And so how do we try to do work and do international, build cross-cultural relationships and engage in this without falling into kind of the things that we've seen that don't work well and that kind of uphold stereotypes and types of power inequalities and things like that. So that's something that I'm really mindful of and that I really strive for, and that all of us strive for together as a team, because we're a team, and that's, to me, the most important.
The only thing I would add that I failed to mention is that you will make mistakes. You have to be open and communicating those mistakes. And I know that in my role as a director and as an organization, we've missed the mark a couple of times. And just being open and honest with our staff and our clients that, hey, we made a mistake. How can we correct it? How can we resolve this? And how do we make sure that we don't have this happen in the future?
Yeah, I know from a Peace Corps perspective, language is certainly a skill that's valued, but they also don't go in expecting that every potential Peace Corps volunteer has had the opportunity that a lot of us have had at Indiana University to study 50 plus languages. So you can be a Peace Corps volunteer in Mongolia and have studied Mongolian language here at Indiana University. So they really like to prioritize having some Spanish background if you're going to serve in a Spanish-speaking region, especially there's so many parts of Central and South America that speak indigenous languages. So if you already have a competency in Spanish, then you can go into your host community because you're invited into that community and you've been spending your orientation and learning Quechua or learning Yucatec Maya. You can kind of focus on the language that they would be using to basis. But like, Dana and Kenneth mentioned, the importance of having cultural humility, that willingness to make mistakes, and just really prioritizing multiple types of communication, not just, again, your world language competency, but for the strategies, the people that you're going to be working with that your team wants you to use.
I actually just wanted to add on to that in terms of language. I don't speak Spanish. I'm learning, and I have a very high, understanding because I speak French fluently. I wasn't expecting to end up in this job. And so I was like, oh, but one of those things is one thing that movement exchange really tries to focus on is that there are so many forms of communication, and language is one of them, but there's also many other ways that you can enter into relationships even if there is a language barrier. And so, I mean, that's to me the most amazing thing, is that I have truly built in my teaching and my work with movement exchange very, very strong relationships with my students and other dance teachers who we might not actually share the same language, but we're able to really build a relationship. That said, now in my job, right, you still need language skills. Where I was working on a contract today where I can read Spanish really well, but I can't write the full contract in Spanish. So then I'm working with my colleagues who do, and we're kind of engaging in that conversation. And so it's kind of that give and take, right? Of like I'm next semester, I am taking a Spanish class. So I actually can learn then how to speak Spanish because I can understand it. If you're talking about me in Spanish, I'll understand. But I do recognize the value of learning that as part of my professional growth as well. But it's also not one of those that if you don't have that language ability, then therefore you are just unable to do, because there's so many ways that you can engage in communication, and there's so many resources like your colleagues and your peers. And Izzy's helping me learn Spanish in the car when we're listening to music, right? Like, I mean, that's like also part of it too, is that a lot of that kind of comes along as you grow and you kind of do this sort of work, is that you start kind of figuring out people's strengths and how you're going to be able to communicate and kind of what you need and what tools.
All right, so this next question, I'm trying to frame it appropriately. So what are skills that you thought that you really value, that you were able to develop while you were a student, or again, you would like to focus on pursuing? And then I think this is a little bit more applicable for Kenneth as a supervisor. If you're looking to hire new people for your team, what skills do you really think are valuable for them to have if they're going to join you in the work that you do?
So we look for innovative and independent thinkers. We look for go-getters, particularly with my program, the IVAP program. So we have a total of 10 regions that cover all 92 counties. So those folks are actually living in those areas. Some of them have offices, some of them don't. And so they have to be go-getters. They have to go into communities that may think or believe that human trafficking doesn't happen in their community. And I've shared with you all earlier today that human trafficking happens in all 92 counties across the state. And so being able to go into a community, provide the data, build those relationships, and be a go-getter yourself and be self-motivated. And so I think self-motivated, independent thinker, innovative, creative, tenacity are definitely skills we look for. Definitely a diverse background. Our staff, we have currently lawyers, social workers, folks that were in the entertainment industry. We have former survivors of human trafficking that work on our staff. We have people that majored in English in college. So just a very good diverse background. And I think overall that helps us as an organization grow. We have folks that are involved in the substance abuse movement. And so having that diverse staff with those diverse experiences also helps us, again, as an organization. But I think those are the critical things that we look for when we interview new candidates for new positions and opportunities.
For me, I think the biggest one, managing your time. Because a lot of this work is hard work. A lot of it is work that you have to do from wherever. Like we don't have a movement exchange office. Like I was doing movement exchange work earlier upstairs, like, sitting in the international studies department. So in many ways, I think, kind of your schoolwork prepares you for a lot of this type of work, because you have to juggle a lot of different kinds of things, right? Like I am writing a grant at 1 minute. I am trying to assess impact on another. I am sending emails to people. I am doing program like you're doing so many different things. And okay, we're also very small. So like we really have to do a lot on our own. But that's what a lot of these types of organizations are, is you might be that one person who is here that you are kind of, on your own in many ways, but then you're connected to a larger network of people. So you have to figure out how to be self-sufficient and how to get your work done. You have to teach yourself a lot. That said, learning how to work together and collaborate with others and like truly collaborate is really key. I don't find myself ever really feeling like I am just doing anything by myself because I have my coworkers, whether they are here, right, coming to support, but also my coworkers that are in Panama, even the chapter presidents that we're working with. It's working together, and so that's where I think we often. And I'm not saying that I learned all of this through group work in school, because we all know how group projects don't necessarily always feel great, work out well, they're difficult. But in like your kind of work that you're doing, whether it's in student organizations or in something that you're helping organize, is really being honest about what your strengths are, where you need help, where you can grow, and figure out who within your kind of like how you can manage that and how you can work together to really play off of each other's strengths. And that's something a lot of times is not necessarily taught. It's something that you kind of have to figure out for yourself. So a lot of trial and error. But it's something that particularly in this kind of work, you really have to rely upon, because you need to be able to be both self-sufficient a lot of times, but then you're also working in highly collaborative environments where you might be working with people who aren't part of your organization, that are community partners, or you have to connect with the people who are supervising X, Y, and Z, where you are going to do a workshop or something like that. So you have to be pretty adaptable at who you work with and when, but you also need to do a lot on your own. So you have to be able to do both pretty well.
All right, and so our last official question before we open it up for any of the questions that you have is, so for students who are interested in getting into this type of work, what would you suggest? What would be some early steps?
I mean, a lot of it is just doing it. I did not expect that I would be sitting here as the executive director when I started getting involved with Movement Exchange almost 6 years ago now as an undergrad student, where they had the chapter here, but I also happened to be friends with someone who was going on to work for them administratively. And I was both getting involved in the chapter, but then also was like, oh, you're doing outreach? I have these ideas of where you can connect. And then all of a sudden I was doing contracted work as their outreach coordinator, right? Like, so a lot of it is doing, right? And kind of approaching things that you're interested in, recognizing your passion, right? What do you want to do? And most of you are probably already doing it. But making sure, and I'm not saying like, I don't believe, it's frustrating that there's not often a lot of financial opportunities within these spaces. I have done and continue to do a lot of unpaid work, not just for Movement Exchange. Now I do have a position and am paid, but still a lot of work that I do for other organizations, community things that I'm passionate about is volunteer based. But I ended up in this position because I was doing it, and I showed that, yes, I can do this. I want to do this. I want to learn. And then that kind of opened up those doors for me. Through Movement Exchange, through doing work for Movement Exchange, I somehow got connected to a music and art school in Ghana in West Africa, that all of a sudden I had these skills that I could say that, hey, I actually am interested in working with you. And this is something that I have now. And so, I worked for them for 5 years, and continue to do some work on the side for their kind of communications here. So a lot of it is both doing the work, but then also like recognizing like what skills you have and like what can you bring to the table. And like, we're not saying no to people who say, hey, I want to help with this. And that's how we ended up in our positions. Like, you shouldn't do this for forever. And I'm not like, I don't believe that you should just always do the unpaid internship or anything like that, because it's not fair. But a lot of it is just being honest and doing the work that you want to do. And then you'll find you get connected to those people that are doing the work and that have those opportunities for you. And so for me, that's how I ended up where I am, was just kind of doing it, realizing that I was passionate about this. And yeah, I'm going to teach these dance classes. Yes, I'm going to do this. And, it kind of just connected me to the right people at the right time. And here I am. So being open to those opportunities, and also just being very open about your passions and what you're passionate about. Because if you're passionate about that, people pick up on it and they want to work with you. And that's, for me, how my doors opened.
So I would say definitely initially research the particular field that you're interested in. Research, I always encourage that. And then volunteer if there are opportunities. May not be able to get a paid position initially, but I know a lot of times we've even hired staff who started off as just volunteers because they had an interest. We didn't have an opportunity. And when an opportunity came up, we hired the volunteer. And then I share a story. So when I was about 12 years old, I started my first business, which was a candy store in my grandfather's garage. But I had been involved in a mentoring program when I was about sixth grade or so. But in order to participate in their entrepreneurship program, you had to be a high school student. And so what I did was I continued to volunteer almost every day during the summertime. I learned every aspect of the business that by the time I was in eighth grade, I was training the high school boys how to run a program and running my own candy store. But I got that opportunity and that experience simply by volunteering my time and expertise. And then the last thing I would say is learn a different skill set. And so I tell folks all the time that if you're passionate about something, if you enjoy doing something, if there are opportunities to participate in organizations, communities, church groups, sororities, fraternities, don't necessarily do what you're passionate about in that organization. Learn a new skill. So if fundraising isn't your thing, be on the fundraising committee. If you're a church and you are great at greeting people, try working the soundboard because those can turn into very valuable skills that employers will look at. Hey, she has this great background in XYZ, but they also have this additional skill that they picked up volunteering their time. And so I know we as an organization, me as a person that employs people, really do pay attention to those soft skills and additional skills that may be outside of what your discipline is in college.
One of the nice thing also about being within a college setting at this stage is, I know right now the big push is for internships. There are a lot of college credits that you can get for doing internships. I know here on campus, if you're interested in human trafficking issues, our mutual colleague, Professor Deb Getz in the School of Public Health, who does a lot of work with their youth leadership development program, trains undergrads especially to be human trafficking education ambassadors and to go into different community organizations and schools. And that's a really great program. And I know also she's been very involved with the Center for Rural Engagement, kind of sustaining Hoosier communities and doing a lot of service learning classes. So that there's other ways you can kind of meet existing goals. You have to get enough credits to graduate. You want to take classes that are interesting to you. But IU also really tried to spend some time making sure that, if you can't unfortunately get paid for those opportunities, at least you can get some academic credit and you can incorporate that into your learning environment. That's also a really big focus of the Global Service and Peace Corps Preparation Program. We require students to take service learning classes and we require them to do an internship related to a global service work sector. So at this point, we would love for any questions, any thoughts that you have, anything that you would like to ask our two distinguished panelists. I know also we did brand this through our Peace Corps program, so if anybody else has with Peace Corps related questions, I'm also happy to put some. And also there's still food in the back. We encourage you to take more food, but yes. Any thoughts?
So my organization, like I said, has been around for 40 years, but we've only been in the work of human trafficking for the last 5 years. And so our organization has what we call about 30 youth service bureaus, and they are spread out across the state. They cover about 62 counties in total. And those youth service bureaus do provide direct services to young people across the state, even though our organization doesn't. They all are members of our organization. And so they come together 4 times a year for trainings and for our quarterly meetings. And about 2015, they had someone come in to talk about human trafficking. And unbeknownst to them, they didn't think that it was an issue here. They didn't think that it was happening in Indiana. And so she kind of blew the cover off and let them know that it was actually happening here. So our organization, I wasn't employed for them at the time, but they wrote a grant to the federal government to uh, start a anti-human trafficking program in Indiana. And unfortunately, it wasn't granted. And so the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute reached out to our organization shortly after that because they had a statewide network of agencies and the infrastructure in place, and asked them to say, hey, we have this money specifically from the Department of Justice to do some anti-trafficking work. You guys have a statewide network. Would you all apply? And so we applied that year and got about $600,000. To date, we're currently at 3.8, so it's continuing to go up because of the need throughout the years. But I have a strong background in advocacy. I've always kind of worked around young people's issues, even with my work as the chair of the Indiana Commission on Black Males. My first job in college was I coordinated the PAGE program for the Indiana House of Representatives. So if you're not familiar with the PAGE program, it's an opportunity to come down and kind of serve as an assistant or intern for the day for your legislator. So my work has always kind of been directly with youth. And so they had a position open to kind of be their advocacy director and kind of like community and government relations person. So I applied for it at my current job, and I didn't get it. And of course, I was very upset. And they said, you know what, we don't think you're a good fit for this position, but we're in the process of applying for this human trafficking grant, and we have a position which was at that time the state outreach coordinator. We think you would be great for that. And so when we apply for it, we think you should apply for it then. Somebody tells you that at the end of the interview, like, this is just a consolation prize, you're not being serious. And lo and behold, when they got the grant, they reached back out to me and they told me to apply for the position. And so I applied for the state outreach position, and I was that for about 3 months, did a great job. I got promoted to be the program manager, did a great job in that role. We had some transition, and eventually now became the director of the organization. So that's how I got involved in the work.
Mhm. I mean, I think for us, the biggest thing is that we really are focused on dance, right? Like we are dancing. And to me, that's huge. Like we're not trying to say that this is what we are bringing. This is what, this type of physical, tangible thing. We're not building houses. We're not kind of saying that this is the physical thing that you are lacking and therefore you need. And so one, engaging in dance is huge, right? We're really focused on just expression and relationships. We also hire, like our students are getting classes every single week, and they have for 10 years, with the exception of like summer breaks. They're getting classes from Panamanian dance instructors that we're hiring every year. We have an annual show where all of our students perform. We have our Panama country director who is in charge of everything there. So she's the one who's running the show. And so for us, it's really about balancing the kind of, we have our year-round programs in Panama. We have our work that's being done here, and our students are also doing that work, right? They are also going out into their communities and they are teaching dance classes as well. And so they're getting an understanding of what it means to be a civic leader and kind of someone who's civically engaged in their community through dance. Our international dance exchanges provide an opportunity for them to both learn from our instructors and what they're doing in Panama. They do teach classes. They are also like all learning how to be dance teachers and things like that. They're also taking dance classes, right? They're in the same position as our students. They're taking classes from someone who they might not understand what they're speaking because they might not speak Spanish. And they're in that same position of having to figure out how to learn through their bodies and learn through dance. And so for us, I think, and that's where for me, I've seen so many examples of people who are going to, bring this or just go out, and they only go once or twice a year and that's it. If that, they just go once, they build a school, they leave. And that drives me insane. Then because that's a very different engagement than truly seeking to build relationships within a community that are based on like ourselves, right? Like who we are and what we bring. And just an example of that, I had a friend of mine who went on an exchange program with a different organization that was focused on law and was in the same area of Panama that we were at. And she was like, this was crazy. We were going around with armed guards. We were going in and out, talking with people, walking. We hardly had a chance to have an actual conversation with anyone. We were staying over here. We didn't like see where people lived or any of this sort of stuff. We were in the same community for several years. We were teaching at the school. The parents were there every day. We were talking with the parents. They were participating in the dance classes. We did a community show. We ended up on the radio. Like they were like, we want you to talk about what you're doing. We were invited to someone New Year's Eve party. We were having dinner in people's homes because people recognized that we were just there as ourselves to bring kind of our own authentic beings into the conversation. And so for us, that's a very big difference than coming in with the assumption that I am just bringing this. It's like, we're just all here to dance and to move and to have a good time. And then that opens up a lot of doors for other conversations that then can happen and different sorts of relationships. Like I'm still friends with my students that I have connected with and continue to meet. And one of them came here on an exchange and he came from Illinois to come and see me. And so that's just a very different dynamic than what you tend to see. And one I really think, I think artists are very kind of perfectly positioned for that type of work just because of how they kind of view human relationships, and something that I wish there was more of in community work, both domestically and abroad. So, and that goes both ways.
Other questions people have? All right. So I really want to thank the time of our panelists, Dana and Kenneth. Thank you for being with us today. We can also kind of turn off the mic and make this a little bit more informal so we're not on a stage versus the audience. But please, again, there's food in the back. And we thank you for coming out today too as well. So thank you.